The phone was still warm against my ear, but the line had already gone dead. My daughter Rachel's words echoed in the kitchen, bouncing off the white tiles and flying straight back into my chest like sharp knives. "Mom, don't bother coming. We've decided to spend Christmas without you. You just get in the way." I'm Valerie, I'm 68 years old, and in that moment, with the scent of French toast and roast pork perfuming the house, I felt like the most useless woman in the world. But what Rachel forgot is that an old woman has a long memory, and in my case, I had something more stored away than just memories. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen, holding the embroidered dish towel I had made as a gift for her. The table was filled with platters covered in aluminum foil. There was the chicken salad that my son-in-law Chris claimed to love. There was the pineapple and coconut trifle my grandson Peter had asked me for 2 weeks ago. There was even the wine I'd saved for 3 years for a special occasion. Everything ready, everything made with the care of someone who spent her entire life running a catering business and knows that food is a language of love. It was 2 p.m. on December 24th. The car trunk was already open in the building's garage, waiting for the cooler boxes. I had already showered, put on my blue silk dress, the same one I wore to Peter's kindergarten graduation, and applied my nude lipstick. I was ready to be the grandmother, the mother, the mother-in-law, the matriarch who arrives bringing abundance and joy. But the call lasted less than a minute. "Mom?" Her voice was strange, muffled, as if she were speaking in hiding. "Look, don't come. I'm serious. Chris and I talked and we want a Christmas just for us. You know how it is, right? You arrive, want to organize everything, complain about the dishes, say the oven is dirty. We want peace. You just get in the way. Don't bother coming?" I didn't answer. My throat closed into a knot so tight that not even air could pass, let alone my voice. I just pulled the phone away from my ear, looked at the device as if it were a venomous creature, and pressed the red button. I hung up without saying a word. The silence that settled in my apartment was deafening. Suddenly, the hum of the refrigerator sounded like a tractor engine. The ticking of the wall clock sounded like hammer blows. "You just get in the way." The phrase spun in my head. In the way. Me, Valerie, who worked on my feet for 35 years, cooking for 500-person weddings to pay for Rachel's law school. Me, who sold my car to make the down payment on the apartment where they now live. Me, who took care of Peter since he was born, so she could work and advance her career. I get in the way. I sat down on a kitchen chair, feeling my legs tremble. The first tear fell onto my lap, staining the fine fabric of the blue dress. Then another, and another. It wasn't a loud cry. It was a silent sob. The kind that hurts deep in the soul, where we store the certainties that crumble. I looked at the platters. What was I going to do with a 6-pound stuffed pork loin? What was I going to do with the gifts wrapped in gold bows sitting in the living room? Peter's remote-controlled car, the expensive leather handbag I bought for Rachel, the watch for Chris. It all seemed like garbage now. The junk of an old woman who just gets in the way. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of my 68 years double on my back. I removed the foil from the trifle, grabbed a spoon, and ate a spoonful standing right there. It was delicious. The sweetness of the pineapple contrasted perfectly with the cream, but in my mouth it tasted like ash. I started to dismantle the Christmas that never happened. I put the platters back in the fridge, stacking them haphazardly. The wine went back to the dusty wine rack. The gifts? Ah, the gifts. I kicked them into a corner of the living room with an anger I didn't know I had. I went to the bedroom, took off the blue dress, wiped the lipstick off with the back of my hand, and put on my old terry cloth robe, the one with a hole in the pocket that smells like comfort. Night fell from the window of my 5th-floor apartment. I saw the city lights. I saw the neighbors' windows twinkling with colorful lights. I heard muffled laughter, Christmas music playing in the distance. The whole world was celebrating togetherness, family, love. And I was there in the dark eating leftover rice and eggs because I didn't have the heart to touch the party food. That's when I decided to open the chest. I have a solid wood chest at the foot of my bed. It's where I keep what I call my life on paper. Photo albums, old documents, letters, receipts. I pulled the chest into the middle of the rug and sat on the floor, cross-legged like a little girl, though my knees complained. I opened the first album. The smell of old paper rose up and embraced me. The first photo was of baby Rachel in my arms at the grand opening of my first little restaurant, Val's Place. I was thin, with deep dark circles under my eyes, but smiling with pride. Her father, my late Gerald, was beside me, holding the sign. We had nothing back then. I would wake up at 4 a.m. to go to the wholesale market for fresh vegetables and go to bed at midnight after closing the register. Rachel slept in a wicker basket under the counter. "You just get in the way," her voice repeated in my mind. I turned the page. Rachel at her graduation from a private high school, an expensive school, one of the best in the city. I remember that year I put off renovating my kitchen, which was falling apart, to pay her overdue tuition and for her graduation trip to Disney World. In the photo, she was beautiful, tanned, smiling with her rich friends. I was in the corner of the photo, half cut off, holding her purse and jacket, always serving, always in the background. I moved on to a more recent album, The Wedding. Rachel and Chris's wedding. It was the most beautiful event my catering business ever organized. 500 guests, shrimp, imported whiskey, decorations with live orchids, all paid for by me. A gift from Mom. "Mom, I want everything to be perfect," she'd said. And I made it perfect. I spent 5 years of savings on that one night. In the photo of the toast, Chris was smiling with the look of someone who'd won the lottery without buying a ticket, and in a way, he had. I kept flipping, and the sadness began to give way to a different feeling, a warmth in my chest that wasn't anguish. It was indignation. I got to the photos of the house where they live today. A beautiful 2-story home in a gated community. I remember the day we went to see the lot. Rachel was pregnant with Peter. "Mom, we can't get a mortgage now. The bank didn't approve Chris's income," she cried. "And what did Valerie do?" Valerie, the widow who gets in the way, took the money from the sale of her business, my retirement fund, the fruit of 30 years of my sweat, and bought the house. "Put it in your name, honey. It's a gift for my grandson to have a place to grow up," I said at the time. But then my hand stopped on a yellowed plastic folder at the bottom of the chest, under the albums. My breath caught. I hadn't touched that folder in years. I carefully opened the elastic band. Inside were official documents with notary stamps, deeds, contracts. I pulled out the purchase and sale document for the house in the gated community. My eyes scanned the typed lines, the fine print we sign and forget. And then I read it, and read it again. My memory, thank God, sometimes fails for things that don't matter. But my late Gerald, before he passed, had made me promise one thing. He always said, "Val, you have too soft a heart. Protect yourself." When I bought the house for them, Gerald's lawyer, Mr. Henderson, insisted on a clause. At the time, Rachel pouted. She said I didn't trust her, but I signed it and made her sign too, just to get Mr. Henderson off my back. I had completely forgotten about it. I thought the house was all hers, but there on the paper it was written as clear as day. Life estate in favor of Valerie Silva Norton. And more importantly, the property was actually in the name of a family holding company I had created on my accountant's advice to pay less tax when I sold the catering business. Rachel was a minority partner. I was the managing director with full powers. And Chris? Chris always bragged to his friends at the Sunday barbecue. My house, my pool, my outdoor kitchen. I let out a laugh, a dry, short laugh in the middle of the dark room. You just get in the way. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:30 p.m. Christmas was almost over. I was alone, in my robe, my face swollen from crying. But for the first time in hours, I didn't feel like a victim. I got up from the floor feeling my knees crack. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took the bottle of wine I was supposed to take to their house. I pulled the cork out with force. I filled a crystal glass, one of those I only used for important guests. I went to the balcony. The night air was cool. I took a generous sip of the wine. It was full-bodied, going down warm. I picked up my cell phone. There were 3 messages in the family group chat from Chris's sister. They were photos of their Christmas dinner. The table was set, but everything looked store-bought. that bland supermarket food. Chris was holding a can of beer, laughing with his mouth wide open. Rachel was in the background with a stressed look on her face, holding Peter, who seemed to be crying. They were happy without me, without the old woman who gets in the way. I zoomed in on the photo. The table they were eating at, I gave it to them. The chandelier above their heads, I paid for it. The roof over their heads. I wasn't a burden. I was the foundation. And when you mess with the foundation too much, the house collapses. I went back inside and grabbed the yellow folder. I took it to the kitchen table, turned on the bright light, and put on my reading glasses. I started reading every paragraph, every clause, every detail of my finances that I had neglected out of trust in my family. I discovered bank statements from a joint account I had with Rachel, where I deposited the rent from 2 small studio apartments I owned downtown. I never touched that money. I left it there for her emergencies. The balance was almost zero. She had been withdrawing it bit by bit every month for the past 2 years. Withdrawal, credit card, payment, designer store, transfer, Chris Robert Mendez. My blood, which had been cold with sadness, began to boil, not with uncontrolled rage, but with absolute clarity. They didn't want me there because I interfered with their fun. Or did they not want me there because my presence reminded them of who really paid the bills for that sham life? Maybe Chris was afraid I'd realize the new SUV in their garage was paid for with the money from my studio apartments. Maybe Rachel was tired of having to be grateful and preferred to pretend she'd achieved everything on her own. I ran my hand over the rough paper of the deed. Very well. Rachel, I whispered to the empty kitchen. You want an independent Christmas? You want distance from the mother who just gets in the way? I looked at the calendar on the wall. The 25th would be a holiday, but the 26th. On the 26th, the county clerk's office and the banks open as usual. On the 26th, real life starts working again. I finished my glass of wine. I didn't eat the pork loin or the chicken salad. I went to the cupboard and got a package of saltine crackers. I ate them slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a strategic banquet. The sadness was gone. In its place was a Valerie who had been dormant for a long time. The Valerie who negotiated with tough suppliers at the wholesale market. The Valerie who fired a chef for stealing filet mignon. The Valerie who built an empire from scratch. They thought I was just a sweet grandma who made trifle. They forgot that before I was a grandmother, I was the boss. I closed the folder with force. The snap of the elastic band sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the early morning. I went to the bedroom, but not to cry. I went to choose the outfit I would wear on the 26th. It had to be something sober, elegant, a gray pantsuit perhaps, and low-heeled, comfortable shoes, because I would have a lot of walking to do. I lay down in bed, hugged my pillow, and for the first time that night, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone holding a full deck of cards and about to turn the tables. I spent Christmas alone. Yes, looking at old photos and eating crackers. But New Year's? New Year's would be very different. I fell asleep with the image of the deed floating in my mind, and the absolute certainty that when the sun rose after the holiday, the old woman who gets in the way was going to show them exactly how much space she occupied. I woke up on December 25th with the sun hitting my face, streaming through the gap in the curtains I'd forgotten to close. The house was in absolute silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. For a second, that weight in my chest tried to return. The memory of rejection, of Rachel's voice saying I got in the way. But then my eyes landed on the yellow folder on my nightstand, where I had left it the night before, and the weight turned into fuel. I got out of bed not like an elderly woman who had been cast aside, but like someone with a full day of work ahead. It wasn't a holiday for me. It was inventory day. I went to the kitchen, made a very strong coffee, the kind that could raise the dead, and didn't even glance at the fridge packed with food from the party that never was. My sustenance today would be different. I took the steaming mug to my home office, a small room Rachel called the junk room, but where my old computer and printer were. They think old people and technology don't mix. Chris is always saying, "Mrs. Norton, be careful not to get a virus. Don't click on anything." Little does he know that I was the one who managed the cost spreadsheets for a catering business that served 3 weddings a weekend. I know how to use Excel. I know how to log into the bank's website. and I know very well what a digital statement is. I turned on the machine. The noise of the fan sounded like a tank engine warming up. The first thing I did was log into the joint account. My hands, which had trembled with sadness yesterday, now typed the password with a steady hand. The screen loaded, and what I saw made me take a long gulp of unsweetened coffee to endure the bitterness. It wasn't just the monthly withdrawals I had noticed last night. Looking closely, filtering the last 6 months, the hole was much deeper. I saw payments for a premium car wash every week. I saw bills from expensive restaurants on weekdays, business lunches that Chris supposedly had with clients, paid for with my sweat. And the worst part, an installment purchase from an electronics store made on December 20th. The amount was exactly the price of that latest generation video game console Peter wanted. They had bought my grandson's gift with my money and didn't even have the decency to invite me to watch the boy open the package. But the real treasure, my secret weapon, wasn't in the checking account. It was in the structure of that family trust. Mr. Henderson, God rest his soul, was a very wise man. When we set up the company to protect the assets, he included a clause of exclusive administration. I took the documents from the yellow folder and started comparing them with what was on the computer screen, on the IRS website. Everything matched. The house they live in, the SUV that Chris drives with his chest puffed out, even the life insurance policy they think they have. Everything is under the umbrella of the Val Norton Holdings, LLC. And who signs for the company? Me. Only me. Rachel has shares, yes, but without administrative voting rights as long as I'm alive. I held the power to evict, to sell, to freeze. I had the power to pull the rug out from under their feet with the stroke of a pen. I leaned back in the hard office chair and closed my eyes for a moment. The smell of coffee mixed with the dusty scent of old books on the shelf. How did I let it get to this point? That was the question hammering in my head. I remembered when I was 45, I was a lioness. I would walk into the catering kitchen shouting orders. I would taste the mushroom gravy with the tip of my finger and know if it needed a pinch of salt or a drop of wine. I negotiated with meat suppliers, haggled over cents on the price per pound of filet, and nobody, absolutely nobody, dared to raise their voice to Val Norton. I built it all by myself, widowed early, with a young daughter to raise. I guess a mother's love is a kind of cataract that slowly blurs your vision. You want so badly to see your child do well? You want so badly to make their life easier so they don't suffer what you suffered, that you start to shrink so they can grow. I kept shrinking, becoming the grandma who makes sweets, the mom who helps out. I stopped being the businesswoman and became the financial backup. They mistook my kindness for weakness, my silence for ignorance. And Chris? Chris. I remembered a conversation last month. He was sitting on my sofa, his feet on the coffee table, complaining about his boss. Valerie, the business world is for sharks. You were lucky in your day. Nowadays, the market eats unprepared people for breakfast. He said this while eating the cornbread cake I had just baked. I just smiled and poured more coffee. Lucky. He called 30 years of hard work, of swollen feet and varicose veins, lucky. And I accepted it. I consented with my silence because I didn't want to create friction, didn't want to be the nagging mother-in-law. But the nagging mother-in-law pays the HOA fees for the luxury community where he lives. The old woman who gets in the way finances the successful executive lifestyle he pretends to have. I opened my eyes and stared at the monitor again. The screen glowed with the coldness of numbers. The balance of my personal investment account, the one I never touched, was intact, thank God. But the operating account, the one that fed their cushy life, was bleeding out. I stood up and went to the office window. The street was deserted. It was Christmas Day. I imagined their house now, the Christmas lunch. They probably reheated yesterday's store-bought food. Chris was probably by the pool with a beer in his hand, thinking he had it made. Rachel was probably on her phone, posting pictures of her perfect family on Instagram. Did they miss me? Or was the relief of not having the old woman around greater? You just get in the way. The phrase returned, but now it sounded ridiculous. How can the foundation get in the way of the roof? If you remove the foundation, the house collapses. It's simple physics, and they were about to get a practical lesson in life's engineering. I returned to the desk and picked up a notepad and a pen. I've always liked writing by hand. It helps organize my thoughts. At the top of the page, I wrote in block letters, Action Plan, December 26th. I needed to be surgical. There was no point in making a scene, shouting, or crying at their door. That would only confirm their theory that I was an unstable old woman. They would use it against me. They would tell the neighbors I was senile. No, my revenge, or rather, my justice, had to be cold, bureaucratic, and unquestionable. First item on the list, the bank. Tomorrow, at 10 a.m. sharp, I would be at the branch door. I had to speak with the manager, Robert. He's known me since the catering days. I will cancel all additional credit cards. I will revoke Rachel's authorization to access the joint account. I will transfer the remaining balance to my personal account, turn off the tap, dry up the source. Second item, the county clerk's office. I need to file an official notice on the property's title. Something to remind anyone who looks up that document that the property is mine and the life estate is mine. I will ensure they can't even think of selling or using the house as collateral for a loan. Something that, knowing Chris, he has probably already considered. Third item, the master key. I have a copy of their house key, tucked away in the back of a drawer for emergencies, as Rachel grudgingly gave it to me one day. Tomorrow, while they're out, Rachel at work, Chris God knows where pretending to work, I will pay a visit. Not to clean, not to cook, but to take inventory of my assets. I looked at the list. It was a simple but devastating plan. I felt a sudden hunger, a hunger for real food. I went to the kitchen, took the pork loin out of the fridge, cut a thick slice, cold as it was, and ate it with my hands, standing up. The seasoning was divine. Rosemary, garlic, white wine. I still knew how to cook like nobody's business. As I chewed, I thought of Peter. My heart ached a little. He wasn't to blame for his parents' greed, but on second thought, what kind of example was he getting? A freeloading father and a passive mother who mistreats her own grandmother. Perhaps by taking back the reins of my life and my money, I was giving him the greatest lesson of all: respect. Respect is earned, but dignity is non-negotiable. I went back to the bedroom and opened my closet. I ran my hand over my dresses. I picked out the charcoal gray pantsuit I wore to Gerald's funeral. It was a classic cut, good Italian fabric. I tried it on in front of the mirror. It was a little loose at the waist. I'd lost weight in recent years from swallowing my pride, but it still commanded respect. I tied a colorful silk scarf around my neck to break the somberness. I didn't want to look like a grieving widow. I wanted to look like the one who owned the whole damn show. I looked at my reflection. White hair, neatly cut. Skin marked by time, but my eyes were sparkling. They weren't the dull eyes of Valerie who just gets in the way. They were the eyes of Val Norton, the boss. I spent the rest of the 25th in silence, but not in solitude. I was in my own company and discovered I was excellent company. I organized the paperwork into color-coded folders. Red for the bank, blue for the property, black for the proof of their improper spending. When night fell, I sat on the balcony again. The wine was gone, so I made tea. The neighborhood was quiet, the Christmas hangover weighing on the city. I picked up my phone. No call from Rachel, no Merry Christmas, Mom, I'm sorry. Text. Nothing. Their silence was the final confirmation that I no longer existed as a person to them, only as a resource. And resources, when they run out or break down, are discarded. Little do they know, the gold mine hasn't run dry. The owner of the mine has just decided to close the gate and change the lock. Tomorrow is the 26th, a business day, a day the banks are open, a day the county clerk's office is operating. I went to bed early. I needed to be rested. My mind rehearsed the conversations I would have with the bank manager. I knew exactly what to say. No emotion, just facts. I want to revoke all access. I want to block the cards. I want to dispute these unauthorized purchases. I fell asleep with a tranquility I hadn't felt in years. The tranquility of someone who knows a storm is coming, but this time I'm not the boat adrift. I am the sea, and tomorrow the tide will turn. The clock at the bank branch read 9:50 a.m. I was first in line, standing on the sidewalk like a sentinel, clutching my black leather purse to my body. The morning sun of the 26th was already warming the pavement. and the street was beginning to pick up that frantic rhythm of people returning to work after the Christmas feasting. I was sweating a little under my gray suit, but I didn't move an inch. When the glass revolving door was unlocked by the security guard, I took a deep breath. That cold, air-conditioned air, smelling of money and clean carpet, brought a wave of nostalgia. It was the smell of my old world. I walked in with my head held high, no looking at the floor, no meekly asking for permission. I went straight to the information desk. "Good morning, ma'am. Here for your pension?" the young woman asked, her hand already reaching for one of those priority tickets for seniors, looking at me with that rehearsed patience they reserve for people they think don't understand anything. "Private and business banking," I replied curtly. "I have an appointment with Robert, and please tell him Valerie Silva Norton has arrived. Not Mrs. Val, Ms. Valerie Norton." The girl blinked twice in surprise and typed quickly into her computer. In less than a minute, Robert appeared at his office door, adjusting his tie. He had known me for 20 years, watched my catering business grow, saw my accounts fatten, and unfortunately, saw me soften in recent times. But Robert is an old hand. He took one look at my posture, the folder under my arm, and the sweet grandma smile died on his face, replaced by professional respect. "Valerie, what an honor. Come in, come in. Can I get you a coffee, some water?" "Black coffee, no sugar, and let's skip the Christmas pleasantries, Robert. I'm in a hurry and have a lot to do." I sat in the leather swivel chair, placed the folder on the mahogany desk, and took my reading glasses out of my purse. Robert sat on the other side, his hands already on the keyboard, tense. He could smell a storm brewing. "Robert, I want a consolidated statement of all accounts linked to my Social Security number and the Val Norton Holdings Trust. Now." While the printer whirred, I drummed my fingers on the desk. When he handed me the papers, I scanned them quickly. It was just as I expected. The hemorrhaging was there, clear and documented. "Very well," I said, putting the paper down. "As of this second, I want to cancel all additional credit cards in the names of Rachel Norton and Chris Mendez." "All of them?" Robert's eyes widened. "All of them, Valerie, including the platinum card they use for household expenses?" "Especially that one. I also want to revoke Rachel's authorization to access the joint account. Make that account individual, in my name only, and cut the astronomical overdraft line to 0. But Valerie, that will have an immediate impact. If they try to use the card at lunch today, it will be declined. Exactly as it should be." I looked the manager straight in the eye. "The money is mine, Robert. The sweat was mine. The party is over. Oh, and one more thing. Transfer the remaining balance from the operating account to my fixed income investment account, the one with a 90-day withdrawal penalty. I want that money ironclad." I signed the paperwork with relish. My signature was firm without the tremor age sometimes brings. The pen glided across the paper like a knife through butter. Each signed copy was a brick I was taking off my back and putting onto the wall I was building between myself and their ingratitude. I left the bank 40 minutes later. The phone in my purse vibrated. It was a notification from the banking app confirming the transactions. I smiled. The first domino had fallen. I hailed a cab. "Where to, ma'am?" "Eden Mills Estates, please." The ride was quiet. I watched the city go by through the window and thought about the irony. They lived in Eden, but I was the one paying for the apple. Arriving at the guarded gate, the attendant, Jose, gave me a friendly smile. He was used to seeing me arrive in an Uber, loaded with grocery bags or platters of food. "Morning, Ms. Val. Here to visit your daughter? They left about 20 minutes ago. Saw Mr. Chris's car head out." "Morning, Jose. Not visiting today. I'm here for an inspection. I'm the owner, remember?" He buzzed me through the pedestrian gate. I walked along the tree-lined streets of the community. Everything was pristine, quiet, with impeccable gardens. I stopped in front of house number 42. It was a beautiful house, I have to admit. I had good taste. But today, looking at it, it seemed like a movie set with terrible actors. I took my key out of my purse. The master key Rachel thought I only had for emergencies. Well, an emergency is when the house is on fire, and from my point of view, their character had already turned to ash. I turned the key. The door opened silently. The smell of yesterday hit me full force. Stale beer, grease, and cigarette smoke. Chris had started smoking on the balcony again, it seemed. The living room was a disaster. Torn wrapping paper on the floor, open toy boxes, empty bottles on the coffee table I paid $3,000 for. I walked through the house like a ghost. I didn't touch anything to tidy up. My hand itched to grab a rag to pick up the trash, but I held back. I wasn't the cleaning lady, I was the owner. I went to the kitchen. The sink was overflowing with dirty dishes, food scraps on the plates, the store-bought dinner they had. I looked at the refrigerator and saw a magnet holding up an overdue HOA bill. 5 days overdue. But I had deposited the money for that in the joint account. I wondered where the money for the fees had gone. I went to the garage. The car was gone, obviously, but I saw Chris's expensive imported bicycle leaning against the wall covered in dust. I saw the professional toolkit I gave him for his birthday, never opened. I went back to the dining room. From my folder, I took out a thick manila envelope. Inside wasn't a love letter or a note from a hurt mother. It contained a certified copy of the house deed, with the life estate clause highlighted in neon yellow, and a formal notice that I had drafted myself and had notarized this morning at the county clerk's office before going to the bank. The text was simple and direct. Notice of resumption of asset management. Dear Ms. Rachel Norton and Mr. Chris Mendez, as of this date, any and all decisions regarding the property, as well as its ordinary and extraordinary expenses, must be addressed directly with the life estate holder and owner. The monthly financial subsidy has been suspended indefinitely pending a full account audit. I placed the envelope right in the center of the dining table, on top of a placemat stained with sauce. It was impossible to miss. I left the house, locking the door twice. Before leaving, I stopped by the community administration office. The manager, a bald and very serious man, met with me. Yes, Ms. Norton. Is there a problem with Unit 42? No problem at all, Mr. Miller. Just a records update. I handed him a copy of the deed. As it states here, the property is owned by my company. From today onwards, the HOA bills should no longer be delivered to Chris or Rachel. They should be emailed directly to me, and any fines, any incidents, I want to know first. I understand, but the couple is still residing there? For now, I replied with an enigmatic smile. For now, they are guests. I left there feeling a lightness that bordered on euphoria. It was 12:30 p.m., lunchtime. My cell phone started vibrating in my pocket. I looked at the screen. Chris' son-in-law. I let it ring. It vibrated, and stopped. A minute later. Rachel, daughter. I let it ring. I could picture the scene. They were probably at that seafood restaurant they love on the waterfront. They'd asked for the check. The waiter brought the card machine. Chris, with his arrogant air, handed over the card. Invalid PIN. Transaction denied. Try again. Must be the chip, sir. The bank advises contacting the branch. The embarrassment, the shame, the waiter glaring, people at nearby tables whispering. Rachel opening her purse, grabbing her card. Not authorized. They must have been beet red, sweating bullets. They were probably scrambling for cash in their pockets, counting coins, or having to call a friend to ask for an emergency Venmo. The phone rang a third time. Now it was a text from Chris. Val, I think our cards were cloned. Everything's blocked. Did you do something to the account? We're being humiliated here. I read the message and let out a laugh inside the taxi. A deep, hearty laugh. Our cards. The audacity. I replied simply, in a meeting. We'll deal with my own issues later. I turned off the phone. I arrived home, at my apartment. I took off the suit. I put on a comfortable outfit, but not the old robe. I wore a cool beige linen set. I prepared a beautiful plate for myself. The leftover pork loin, sliced thin, with an arugula and sun-dried tomato salad. I poured a glass of grape juice into a crystal glass. I ate in peace. The silence of my home was no longer loneliness. It was sovereignty. I turned on the TV to watch the news, but my mind was at the house in the community. They must be arriving now, furious, confused. I imagined the moment they would walk into the living room. Chris kicking the door, Rachel complaining that her mother was going crazy or throwing a tantrum. They would go to the kitchen for a glass of water, walk past the dining room, and see the envelope. The manila envelope on the dirty table. Their silence would be different from mine. Theirs would be the silence of fear. The silence of someone who steps on a non-existent stair and feels their stomach drop. At 4 p.m., my landline rang. I knew they would try the landline when I didn't answer my cell. I picked up the receiver and left it off the hook. I didn't want to hear yelling today. Today was the day of silent execution. The day the gears stopped turning in their favor and started grinding up their free ride. I went to the balcony to water my plants. My ferns were beautiful, green, and lush. They just needed water and light. People are different. People sometimes need pruning to grow properly. And I had the shears in my hand. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange. I knew it would be a long night for them, with no credit card to order a pizza, with a fridge full of leftovers and that official document staring them down from the table. They would have to talk, really talk, without the distraction of shopping, without the anesthesia of luxury paid for by the old woman. They would have to face reality. Their life was a house of cards, and I had just turned on the fan. When the moon appeared, I sat in my reading chair. I picked up a book I'd been trying to read for months but couldn't concentrate on. The anticipation of what was to come was electrifying. I felt no guilt. Funny, I thought I would. I thought my mother's heart would falter at the thought of letting Rachel be embarrassed at the restaurant. But no. What I felt was dignity. I was returning responsibility to them. It was the most valuable Christmas gift I could give, though they wouldn't understand that now. Tomorrow would be the day of confrontation. They would come here, I was sure of it. They would come armed with victimhood, with emotional blackmail, using Peter as a shield. But the Valerie waiting for them was not the same one from the 24th. I looked at the phone off the hook. It emitted that insistent dial tone. I put it back. It rang immediately. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I took a deep breath, smoothed my linen dress, and reached for it. Hello? My voice came out calm, firm. On the other end, I didn't hear yelling. I heard ragged, short breaths. It was the sound of someone who had just read the notice and finally understood who held the pen. It was the sound of shock. The execution was complete. Now the war would begin. The doorbell rang not like a visitor's announcement, but like a summons to war. The knocks were sharp, quick, and insistent, followed by the sound of a key trying to turn in the lock. Except they forgot one important detail. I had changed the lock on my apartment door that very morning, taking advantage of the locksmith I had called to open a jammed cabinet. I knew they would come, and I knew they still thought they owned my home, just as they thought they owned my life. I heard Chris's voice, muffled by the solid wood. The key won't go in, Rachel. Your mother changed the lock. Mrs. Norton, open this door. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the chamomile tea I was holding. Not to calm myself because I was perfectly calm, but because I like chamomile. I walked slowly to the door, taking my time, listening to the shouting escalate. Mom, for God's sake, open up. We need to talk. It was Rachel, with that tearful voice she's used since she was a little girl wanting a new toy. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. The scene in the hallway would have been pitiful if I had any pity left to spare. Chris was red-faced, sweating profusely, with sweat stains under the arms of his dress shirt. Rachel's makeup was smeared, her hair haphazardly tied in a loose bun, and her eyes were swollen. Peter wasn't with them, thank God. They must have left him at a friend's house or with his other grandmother, the one they can't exploit for money. Come in, I said quietly, stepping aside, and wipe your feet on the mat. I just vacuumed. They stormed in like a hurricane, bringing the chaotic energy of desperation into my living room. Chris didn't even wait for me to close the door before he started pacing, gesticulating wildly. Have you lost your mind, Valerie? Have you lost your damn mind? He yelled, pointing a finger at me. Blocking the cards during a holiday? Sending a legal notice? Do you have any idea how embarrassed we were at that restaurant? The waiter almost called the cops, thinking we were scammers. I closed the door gently and turned the lock. I walked to my favorite armchair, the green velvet one, and sat down. I placed my teacup on its saucer with a delicate clink. Sit down, Chris, I ordered. I didn't shout. I just used the tone of voice I used when a waiter dropped a tray of glasses in the middle of a party. A tone that allows for no argument. He froze mid-pace, his mouth agape. Rachel threw herself onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. "Mom, how could you?" she sobbed, peering at me through her fingers. "We're your family. You cut off everything. We don't even have money for gas to get home. We had to come with whatever was left in the tank." I looked at them both. There they were, the paragons of truth, the modern, independent young people who decided to spend Christmas without the old woman who gets in the way. Now they looked like two children who had just broken a neighbor's window. "Funny," I began, crossing my legs. "On the 24th, when you called me, you said you wanted a Christmas for just you two, that I was disturbing your family's peace. I was merely granting your request. I gave you total independence. Financial independence included. Isn't that what every adult wants?" "This isn't independence, it's cruelty," Chris exploded. But he sat on the edge of the sofa, visibly intimidated by my composure. "You know my salary is tied up with the financing for other things. We were counting on that money from the joint account for household expenses. That house belongs to your grandson." "The house," I corrected, raising a finger, "belongs to Val Norton Holdings, LLC, and if you read the notice I left on your dining table, you'd know the life estate is mine. You live there by my grace, a verbal agreement I have just revoked." Chris let out a nervous laugh, running a hand through his thinning hair. "That's worthless. Anyone can get a paper notarized. Let's see a judge throw us out with a small child. You wouldn't have the guts. She's your daughter. He's your grandson." "Guts, my dear son-in-law, is something I've never lacked," I replied, looking him dead in the eye. "Guts to raise a daughter alone. Guts to start a business with nothing. Guts to face down sharks in the market. You confused my love with weakness, and that was your fatal mistake." I stood up from the armchair and went to the bookshelf. I grabbed the black folder, the folder of evidence. I returned and tossed it onto the coffee table with a heavy thud. "Open it," I commanded. Rachel looked at the folder fearfully as if it might bite. Chris, trying to maintain his alpha male facade, grabbed it and opened it. The first page was the color-coded spreadsheet I had printed. "What is this?" he asked, frowning. "That is the statement of your shame, Chris," I said, pointing to the red lines. "Le Petit Restaurant last Tuesday, $480, imported wine shop, $200. A relaxing massage at the mall spa for Rachel, $300. All paid for with the rental income from my studio apartments. Money that was meant for emergencies." "Since when is a massage an emergency, Rachel?" She lowered her head, biting her lip. "We were stressed, Mom. Chris has been working so hard." "Working?" I let out a dry laugh. "Turn the page, Chris." He turned it. It was the attendance report from the luxury gym he belongs to during business hours. I got it because guess what? The gym membership is also paid by my company as a health benefit. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 2 to 4 p.m. working hours, aren't they, Chris? While you were telling Rachel you were in client meetings, you were lifting weights and using the sauna, all on the dime of the mother-in-law who just gets in the way. The color drained from Chris's face. He looked at Rachel, who was staring at him with a mixture of shock and fury. "You said you were closing the deal with the construction company," Rachel whispered. "She's lying." Chris tried, but his voice failed him. "This is doctored." "Don't insult my intelligence, young man," I cut in sharply. "I don't play with Photoshop, I play with accounting, and your accounts don't add up. You live the life of millionaires on a retired cook's income. Except the cook is tired of serving the banquet and eating scraps in the kitchen." The silence in the room was heavy. You could hear Chris's ragged breathing. They were cornered. There was nowhere to run, no emotional argument that could cover the facts printed on those pages. Rachel started crying again, but this time it was different. It wasn't a tantrum, it was the cry of fear. Real fear. She looked around my simple apartment, all mine, paid for, decorated with my things, and realized I was the only solid thing in her life. "Mom, what's going to happen now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Are you going to kick us out? Put Peter on the street?" "Peter is the only victim in this story," I replied, my heart aching slightly but my posture remaining ironclad. He will always have a roof over his head. The question is whether you two deserve to live under that roof with him. We'll pay the money back, Chris said quickly, trying to negotiate. I'll do some side jobs, sell some things. We'll pay you back in installments, but please unblock the cards, Val. For God's sake. We have the electric bill due tomorrow. The electric bill is in my name, I reminded him, and I've already paid it because I am not irresponsible. But from now on, the rules have changed. I stood up and walked to the window. The city outside was the same, but in here their world had been turned upside down. I turned to face them, feeling the power of the moment. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. It was a long overdue education. If you want part 2, let me know in the comments, please.